I started my Sims 4 Forever World a good few months ago now, and it has fully transformed how I perceive, play, and enjoy The Sims 4. I've made a lot of videos and live streams on the topic because I am so in love with my save file, and I love sharing how it's progressing with you guys. While I've made a few guides and tips and tricks videos on creating and managing a Forever World in The Sims 4, I thought today would be a great opportunity to dive into some of the specific questions that you guys have on this topic. So today I'm going to be doing some speed building in Foundry Cove in my Forever World while working through the fantastic questions that you guys have sent in. These are going to span from creating goals for your Forever World Sims, managing other save files alongside your Forever World, rotational gameplay, how to keep track of your worlds in general, and even a little bit on running a Sims YouTube channel, and one or two personal questions are in there too, I think. We're just gonna have a grand old time, so grab a snack and settle in. But before we get into any of that, my name is Yasmin, and my mission here on the channel is to help serious simmers like you to find meaningful and fulfilling gameplay in your favorite life sim games. My question of the day is, do you have any more questions about any of the topics that we're talking about today? If you do, feel free to drop them in the comment section down below and I'll get in there and we can continue this Q&A session down there. So let's get into it. Okay, honestly, right, today's video is really throwing me back to the super early days of my channel when I would do kind of in the moment voiceovers over speed build content that I did in Animal Crossing. So this is feeling very strange right now. If you're wondering why I'm looking down, why I'm looking over here, it's because I've got the speed build going on my main monitor so that I can kind of keep track of time and everything and kind of give a little bit of narration on what I'm kind of doing in the game. And then I've got your fantastic questions and everything over on this monitor here, so I'm sorry if I'm not kind of looking right at you guys like I usually am, but as I said, this is a little bit more of a chill time today. So the first part of the speed build that I'm doing, before I get into any of the questions, we are over at Cassandra Goth's house, and I actually decided that it was finally time to add a kind of another level to the build, and this entire kind of second story or first story bit above the ground floor, there we go, is going to be entirely Cassandra's domain. I really went crazy on kind of adding a lot more, well, you know, kind of reds and a little bit more kind of texture and patterning to her home, and didn't really do much with the basement, but I'm actually really happy with how this build turned out. We have about 50,000 simoleons to play around with, and I got kind of lost in doing this speed build, if I do say so myself. So, though, let's get into your guys' questions. So, again, bear with me as I'm reading them just here, but the first one that we have is from, oh, I'm gonna absolutely butcher your username. Is it Aurora Perlez? Question mark. They say thank you for the videos and inspirational content. Your question, my question is, I'm reading this as if I'm on stream. Here we go. My question: how do you make it in your Forever World goals to not be overwhelmed by all the content that The Sims has to offer? You know, do you mainly focus on playing on kind of in the, you know, in the moment, I think that you're maybe meaning, or, you know, go by household goals? Okay, so this is actually such a good question, and it really ties into the next one that I'm going to be answering as well. I've tried to really group the questions that you guys left me by kind of loose categories. But in terms of my tips for not getting overwhelmed by how much content The Sims 4 has to offer, firstly, how funny is it that that's one of the problems that we gamers have, is that there's simply too much to do in the game, but we don't know what to do. I try to really hone in on what rough gameplay theme I'm feeling like playing with. So, you know, am I wanting to play with kind of farming, cottage living kind of stuff? Am I wanting to have a very scientific, logical sim like Cassandra here? Am I wanting to focus on occult gameplay and kind of stuff like that? And then I like to get into gameplay with my Sims once I've sort of done this loose brainstorming, and then kind of let the game take the wheel a little bit, let kind of how I'm playing, let what I'm having fun with, and let what the sim themselves is kind of leaning into the most kind of dictate the specific direction that I go in. Because again, see the kind of you know, farming, living off the land kind of gameplay. There are so many directions and kind of so many packs that you could kind of feed off of for that. You know, do you go down country living or cottage living? There we go, not country living. Do you go off of, you know, the like horse ranch direction. There is so much to do. So in terms of deciding what you play with, again, let the game take the wheel and then kind of see what you're having the most fun with and then really lock in on those, you know, kind of skills. I might start with wanting like a sim to master 5 skills. I might then likely nail it down to 3 because 5 is a lot to focus on. So I hope that that kind of answered that question. But then Eve here in your question just here, so you're starting a Forever World after watching the videos, but you sometimes struggle with finding a goal / meaning with the household that you make. Often it feels tedious with what you're playing, and it's too easy to lose the fun with the household once you've been with them for a while. So do I have any tips on how to make the gameplay more interesting and spontaneous? So I think I group these two together because it's obviously related to goals in your gameplay, and it's similar but also the kind of opposite issue with trying to find goals for your household. And it's honestly a similar approach that I would take with the first question just there, and that is one of my biggest things that I talk about in my videos, is starting with a character-led approach, or, you know, kind of like a gameplay-led approach to kind of designing your sims. So, but like hands down, without fail, the sims that I have kind of dropped the quickest and that, you know, make the biggest portion of the pile on the abandoned save file graveyard that I have are the times when I feel like playing the game, but I don't know what I want to play. And it's very unintentional. I will create a household. They'll be really, really pretty. And they'll have some really, really nice traits. You know, very generic ones like loves the outdoors, good and romantic, you know. That's like the blandest sim I've ever heard of. That is no, there's nothing there, okay? There's nothing of substance, and so unsurprisingly, shockingly, I stopped playing with them. However, the times when I start a new household with my little character creations sheet, which you can find in SavePal in the description down below, you know we're going to be talking about SavePal later on in this video, but I like generate my little like character design process, the kind of questions that I usually work through, and the very first one is, what do I fancy playing? So I always start with like, what gameplay I want to explore. Me, Yasmin, the sim in real life. And then I go into the game and try and work my way through to kind of create a character that would let me explore that in an interesting way. Again, we have a sim that loves the outdoors, but maybe she's squeamish, you know, maybe she is trying to go through this process of learning to, like, you know, be a bit more fearless and brave in the wild. I don't know, like, I hope that that makes a bit of sense. But okay, so moving on, oh no, wait, hold on. One more thing that I wanted to touch on in this is like letting the systems in the game again take the wheel. What bucket list items do your sims automatically generate? Are they having any like autonomous kind of trait changes if you have growing together? You know, like, use the neighborhood stories, kind of everything and anything that you can do to add chaos to your game. I absolutely love, truly. Let the chips fall where they may, you know? But next, okay, as I said, you know, we're going to be talking about SavePal, and here we are. So Sundi asks, hi, I've been using SavePal and your 5th generation had kids and the 6th generation has moved to their own household and whatnot. It would be awesome to see what you do when you have a situation like that in SavePal, specifically at the household level. And then Sundi goes on to say, maybe make the pictures of the household kind of black and white to show the difference if you're wanting to maybe like retire a household once you move on to the next generation, and you kind of split them up. So firstly, I love that idea. I think that that is fantastic, and it might even be something that I implement in my own SavePal when in the very veggie generation, or very veggie household, there we go, we move on to the 2nd generation, maybe, not 100% sure quite yet, but I love that idea. Firstly as well, thank you so much for picking up SavePal. I hope that you're loving it and that it's really helping you to kind of just have a lot more fun and like manage your sims and everything, so thank you so much. But I would definitely do exactly what you've said there. If you have separated out the sims between Gen 5 and 6, start a brand new household and kind of like page and everything for your Gen 6 sims. You still will obviously retain all of the individual sim profiles for each of the, you know, Gen 6 sims, drag them into the new household, and then I would say that you could, you know, kind of make some sort of note or add in the kind of like important relationships section at the household level. You could then link to the other family page for the Gen 5 sims. And right, this section, Entirely not sponsored, 100%. However, I am one of their kind of affiliated creators. I will say that using a service like the Sims tree would be perfect here, because you could go in and like take go in, create one of the, like a really fantastic family tree in the Sims tree, and then take a screenshot of it with the entire family. I mean, like Gen 5, Gen 6, every generation beforehand. But then you could kind of copy and paste that image between both households to kind of like have some sort of sense of continuity between them, if that makes sense. If you want to check out the Sims tree, I do have a link and a creator code that I'll get a little bit of an affiliate kickback from. So if you want to use that, it's in the description below. Again, not sponsored. I just think that it tied in really well to the question that you had there. So again, I hope that answered that. And let's move on. Next, I had a lot of questions on rotational gameplay and kind of how I kind of work between households in my Forever World. So I'm really sorry. I'm not 100% sure. I'm going to call you Ivy. I'm not 100% sure how to say your name just there. But how would you balance playing with a legacy and other families in the same save in a Forever World? So that's a fantastic question, especially if you don't want to see progress happen in between, in your legacy household while you're playing with other Sims. But here's the secret. I turn off aging for all households apart from my currently active household, which will mean, so say I'm playing in my legacy household, I then go to play in another household, my other Sims won't age. I also turn off neighborhood stories so that they don't go and do crazy stuff while I'm not watching them. I have been rotating between a lot of other households in my own Forever World, while obviously playing with the Very Veggie Challenge, and I have not noticed anything crazy or particularly catastrophic happen with them while I've been away, but I'll keep you guys updated on that. So this next question comes from Chris D. So love the channel, spark new love for the game. So glad to hear that. You've played since November of 2000. Love it with The Sims 1. And the question is, do I play with full autonomy? And do I do rags to riches all the time or use money cheats? So this question, I didn't 1000% know where to fit in. It's kind of just generally relating to my settings and gameplay style. So I do play with full autonomy because I adore the chaos. Truly, I love it. It makes my game so much funnier. And I do a lot of rags to riches. I try not to use money cheats because I think that defeats the purpose of the game a little bit. It is kind of like, I love playing it as a capitalist speedrun simulator. So where would the challenge and the fun be if I just give myself all the money, I do sometimes do like a bit of a semi rags to riches run where I will kind of start with like the shell of a house but maybe no furniture or just really basic stuff, just to get a little bit of like variety in there. And also, like, I think that rags to riches and kind of sort of soft rags to riches starts like that are so good because they give you a bit of a springboard to start learning about your Sims personality a little bit. I don't know, that's just my thoughts on that. Okay, so this question is from Evion. Again, I think that I've said your name wrong there, but you're feeling so excited to play The Sims every day because of the Forever World philosophy. Oh, I love the sound of that. That's very fancy. And so, hold on, I'm just getting to the question here. You've made up a few storylines for your household, but you're having a little bit of trouble with continuing your gameplay after playing with the same household for a while. Do you have any tips on getting back into a household that you haven't played with for a long time? Yes. Again, linking to SavePal, but it doesn't have to be. Track your gameplay sessions. So in SavePal, I've set up like a little gameplay journal where it has a space where you can record what you did in one gameplay session and then what your kind of goals are for the next one. And this is so helpful if you kind of switch between a lot of households, you put the game down for a little while and then you pick it back up and you're like, who are these Sims? I don't know them, I don't care about them. Whereas having this kind of gameplay journal will help you kind of know, oh yeah, I remember who this Sim was, I remember roughly what I was doing, and I'm ready to kind of get back into them now. And that actually linked really, really well to another question that we had here. And that is from Orpheus Jack. Great name there. How do you stop yourself from fixating on one household? So again, it's the kind of other side of the coin to this discussion, I think. You usually can't pry yourself away from whenever your current household is for a couple of weeks. But then that usually leads to a lot of burnout and then you never revisit the household again. And I think that because I switch between quite a lot of households, I tend to not hyperfixate too much on just one. It's usually like I have a few that I'm obsessed with, like Cassandra and the Very Veggie household. Love it. Literally, it was either last week or the week before. Basically every stream for that week was Very Veggie. But then I started going back to some of my other households. I added some new ones. We mixed it up. And so I think that my biggest tip here is to make sure that you are consuming other media and that you have other hobbies that aren't just The Sims 4. Because like reading a new book, you might be like, oh yeah, I feel really inspired now in the game to go and create this new household based on this character in this book. And so it's the kind of like giving your brain something else to chew on so that you're not just chewing on this one household, if that makes sense, and you're like obsession with them, because we're simmers. We know how deep it can go, truly. But I think that again, having variety, and then that will kind of, I guess, start this kind of flywheel of, right, you're really enjoying one household, you take a little bit of a break, you get really excited to start a new household, and then, you know, you already have the other one to kind of go back to. So I hope that that sort of helps to answer that question just there. Question mark. And lastly, we have a question from, I think, is it Rafaela there? What's your system to rotate between households? Do I play with them during a specific time frame? And how would you decide when/who to play with next? I don't have a system. My system is, what do I feel like playing with today? Yes, I feel like playing with Cassandra Goth, and so I will play with Cassandra Goth. And honestly, I more break it down by kind of play session than a particular time that I switch households in game. I don't use a strict system or kind of like, you know, I know kind of back in the day there was much more of a trend of like setting up a big spreadsheet to kind of track when you rotate between households, especially like for The Sims 2 and stuff. I don't. I just think about what sim I want to play with today, and that usually answers the question. I've been a little bit more strict with it recently as I've been playing with my 100 Days series, but other than that, don't really track when and how I rotate my sims. I'm sorry if that's a little bit of a letdown, truly. Next, Eve has left a great question here. How should you grow your YouTube channel? And do you have any tips for somebody who wants to make a YouTube channel dedicated to The Sims as well? Right, I have two really big tips here. One, do it for the love of the game and not for the love of the bag. It took me a whole year of making videos back in 2020 to 2021 before I got accepted into the YouTube Partner Program, which is a lot of hours of gameplay, and kind of, I actually started in the Animal Crossing kind of sphere, and so it was because I loved Animal Crossing that I made content. So do it because you enjoy playing the game and not because you want to make money. If anybody tells you that YouTube's a get rich quick scheme, run for the hills. It is a lie, okay? After 5 years have I been able to make this my, you know, kind of job, I guess. And secondly, my second big tip is guard your digital well-being as if your life depends on it. And what I mean by here is making gaming content is a bit of a weird one, and here my sociology brain is gonna kind of jump out. It's a weird one because you're blurring those lines between play and labor, as in, you know, work. And so you have to make sure that you're guarding your peace, you're taking breaks from the game, taking breaks from making content, because that, if you don't, fastest route to burnout right there. Also, make sure that you like don't take analytics and numbers too much to heart, or if you do, take breaks from it. I recently had to delete YouTube Studio from my phone because sometimes I get a little bit too sucked into refreshing and like looking at the views, looking at the subscriber numbers, looking at how stuff performing. Like, you have to be able to protect your peace with it, truly. And actually, this is a bit of a random thing here. I did want to say I've actually dropped a little Google Doc, or like a little Google form thing in the description of today's video, because I know that we've got quite a few people in the community that are kind of on this journey for yourselves. And it's basically, if you want somebody to bounce ideas off of, if you want kind of like, I guess, sort of like coaching, I hate that word, or like a little bit of mentorship, generally somebody to talk to about like content strategy, and kind of, you know, even the more practical tips, I'd love to see if I could help. So I've dropped a little, you know, Google Forms link down there, and we can see if we can, you know, get a bit of a call going. And yeah, so that's down there. If you just want to chat to me about, you know, content creation stuff, it will be paid, but like not too much. I think I've priced it fairly, but again, that's down there if you would like to have a little chat with me about YouTube and all of that good stuff. Okay. Apologies, gamers. I had to pause for a brief interlude to have a little phone call with my mother there. But next we're moving on to talking about managing Sims outside of my active household. And the OG Midori asks, do you pay attention to the Sims that you don't actively play with? You know, giving them like makeovers, checking their family tree, stuff like that. And we had quite a similar question from Tara as well, you know, asking if I need to go into the unplayed households in like household management to do kind of some like housekeeping and stuff like that. So I don't touch 99% of the unplayed households in my game. And the kind of like townies, the EA made, the NPCs, don't really do anything with them if I'm not playing with them. I do turn off aging for my non-active household to make sure that the Sims around me don't die out and don't get super duper ugly straight away. So that really helps. I also turn off neighborhood stories. Roughly, there is some change in my game, still a bit of a mystery, honestly. But I do that so that then everything doesn't get too crazy while there still being a little bit of like fun variation and variety. But kind of, I think I briefly talked about this earlier, I don't really care for Cass all that much, so I'm quite good at being able to just ignore it if my Sims look a little bit uggo, you know, if they're outside of the household that I'm mainly focusing on. But I know that that's not the case for every player, and so if you enjoy Cass, go in and do it. But if it's a little bit of a headache for you like it is for me, if you could ignore it, do your best to, I guess would be my advice there, because if it's not, you know, actively kind of harming your gameplay, if it's just more of an aesthetic thing, yeah, you've got this. You can look past it. I believe in you. I believe in you. You've got this. Midori also asks if I like cats. Yes, I am very much so a cat person, in fact. And the last question there that you have, which is, what do you do with saves that existed before your forever world, is kind of going into kind of another like category of questions that we've got here. And that is nothing. Like my pre-Forever World save files, I did absolutely nothing because I did not care for them at all. In fact, I don't remember any of these households. I don't remember any of the Sims in them. And this was the main reason why I started my Forever World in the first place, was because I just didn't care for the Sims that I had created. And now we're getting into burnt pancakes just here. Honestly, I might change up the timings on these recordings so that then I can actually fit in all the questions, because I've been gabbing away for much too long. But so I like have some fond memories of my very first household or two when I started playing the game back in like 2015, but those save files are long gone now, so I do absolutely nothing with them. Oh, that's the timer for my chicken for my lunch. I'm gonna turn that off just there. Okay, I'm back. I went and took a quick break to go ahead and turn my chicken off. Hopefully, touch wood, that is gonna be the last little interruption. There we go, that I'm gonna have during the rest of the filming of this video. But a similar question that we had from Alyssa here. My main question is about combining old save files into your Forever Worlds, if that's possible. You have a Super Sim and an old legacy family that you want to include in your Forever save, but you don't want to lose their items, homes, skills, etc. So Leone, actually one of our lovely, wonderful channel members and a big part of our community here, did leave a really good suggestion about saving the household to the gallery, including the Sim, the house, and even pulling out the Sim's inventory and kind of laying it on the ground. That is a great way to then be able to like pick up and basically put the house back down in a different save file. It's not a perfect trick. You will lose out on, kind of like relationships between the Sims and stuff like that, so maybe it wouldn't work quite as seamlessly for a legacy household. Kind of family tree disruptions if you have multiple generations that aren't in the household anymore, so that might make it a little bit more tricky. But playing with a Super Sim, I think, would definitely be a viable option to do that. Again, you might lose relationships and stuff, but the whole thing of a Forever World is that I'm sure that you'll kind of regain these quickly enough in time, and that then your super sim will just, you know, slide right into the world that you've already created just there. So again, I hope that answers the question. It kind of, I guess, gives you the opportunity for the sim to be kind of reborn a little bit in a way. But no, I don't think that it's impossible, and it's something that I would love to hear you guys' opinions about, because if you are kind of a player that likes to play between multiple households, you might have a bit more kind of input on that than I do. But yes, thank you again for the assist on that, Leone, just there. But okay, I wanted to make sure that I had time to answer this final question from Flirted just here, because this is such a fun and interesting one. This one is less so about Forever Worlds and is more just a little bit of some, you know, musings on the game and the wider community itself. But Flirted asks, since I remember you talking about your sociology degree, did you ever think about the Sims community in terms of sociology? Or Flirted always feels like the Sims community is quite a bit different, and your nerd brain would like to verify this hypothesis. Firstly, absolutely love this question. And I've actually made a video a couple of years ago at this point about talking about the Sims franchise. So not necessarily about the community, but more so about the game itself, and the kind of wider franchise and the history of it. In, you know, looking at it through a Marxist theory lens, which was a really fun one. That's the lamest thing I've ever said right there. But to do with the Sims community and the kind of player base, this is going to be less so of an informed kind of theoretical analysis. It's going to be a bit more armchair analysis, she says as she leans back in her chair. But I think that I'm not kind of breaking any ground by saying that the Sims community in general is very tribal feeling. You know, you're either ride or die, the Sims 4 and its development team can do nothing wrong, or you are, you know, die hard, I despise the Sims and everything about it and everyone who plays it and every Sims 4 creator. Or, you know, you're in the camp of the Sims 2/3/1. I don't know if there are any players like that, but the older games were better kind of a camp. I think that this kind of general, very sort of black and white thinking within the Sims community, Sims community, and this real lack of ability to have nuanced discussions around the game is more to do with the nature of the game itself. I think that the Sims franchise is so uniquely positioned in the, you know, kind of gaming sphere, because we use it to tell stories, we use it to create characters, we form really deep emotional connections to it. And, you know, for many of us, the franchise has been a really formative part of our childhood. You know, for me, I'm an only child. I'm a gamer. Like, I, you know, relied on this game a lot to have fun as a kid. You know, now as an adult, like, you know, it's been there throughout however many years of my life at this point. And basically, in my kind of, I don't even know if this is like a proper sociological view on it, but it's like, I feel like we're also emotionally kind of bonded to the game and the wider franchise, and it's only really exasperated nowadays by, you know, now that we're like a post-COVID world, but you guys know what I mean, where it's like we have so few third spaces and kind of places to hang out for free in real life. You know, there's also like the, you know, one of the kind of current buzzwords, but I totally agree with it, is the general kind of like loneliness epidemic. Like, I think that, you know, that's a real thing. You know, we rely on this game and this franchise even more now to kind of nourish like the social parts of us, you know, again, the parts of us that really crave making connection, telling stories and stuff that like our like monkey brains in, you know, centuries, millennia past would do with people, you know, in community spaces. And so, you know, it's like we live in a very different time to when we might have been growing up with the game, where it's like, you know, you sit around the computer, which is like a ginormous thing on like a super old desk with like the pull out like little wheelie like drawer thing while like the keyboard sits, you know, you sit around that and you giggle with your pal as you make your Sims boohoo, and you pray that their parents don't walk in, because then, oh, that'll be a little bit weird and awkward when you're just hanging out at your friend's house and you're like 8 years old, you know, like we don't really have that kind of moment with the game anymore. You know, technology is so much more accessible. I don't know. I digress. I think that all of these kinds of general conversations, which I have not very eloquently strung together, really make it so many of us players have really strong and again quite like tribal opinions towards the game and the franchise in general, and you know, that's why they feel the need to get their claws out and defend it, or why they feel so even deeply betrayed by the franchise in its current direction. I think that it's all stemming from like a point of love, which is that's the most Love Actually thing I've ever said. But yeah, so I think that those are my kind of current musings on the state of the Sims community and all of that stuff. And what a great way to kind of start rounding out this video just here, and to say that I'm so proud of our little corner of the community that we've carved out here. I say this on stream all the time when a slightly more difficult or kind of controversial topic of discussion comes up, is that I'm so proud of the little group that we have cultivated here, where we do attack these kinds of, again, topics of discussion so respectfully, and I think that we're quite a unique little space here in the community in that respect, and so I have to thank everybody once again for that, because honestly, it seems like it's on fire constantly, so we're just doing good. It's like, you know that meme where it's like the dog that sat in the fire and it's like, everything's fine? That's us. That's just over here vibing, honestly. But on that note, my loves, that is the end of the questions that I got from you guys. Thank you all so much for sending those in. They're great. This video has gone on for much too long, so I'm gonna start rounding things out. If you have any more questions, drop them in the description below, and I will do my best to get to them down there and continue the fun. But in the meantime, let me, oh no, hold on, I need to go over here so that I can pull up my fantastic list of all of our channel members. Right, okay, let me end this video by thanking our wonderful, amazing channel members. So starting with the Tiberium level, we've got Amy M, Roberta C, Bloodied Porcelain, Lady Slantro, and Vanagander. And moving on to our growing tribe, speaking of tribes, like our growing tribe of Soul Piece members, we have Rinanabin, aka Catherine. We've got Adriana J, Ebba L, Charlie, Rachel D, Lisa S, Leone, Mason P, Melissa H, Nina B, Moa1015, Paulina, Leslie and I, Alexandra, Corina SH, Laura, Nancy P, Jazzy Smiles, Mooney, Lindsay S, Ellie, Rachel52, Ali E, Mally, Scotty M, Salt Plays, Emmy-chan99, Curse10, Precious Mackenzie, Leanne B, Wraithrealm, Jen, Emo, and Ida G. Literally, thank you guys all so much. Soon, I might have to not be able to read out Soul Piece members because we have so many of them. But literally, thank you guys all for hanging out with me today. I hope you enjoyed the speed build. I know that it took a bit of a backseat today, but nonetheless. But with that said, you guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon.